This is Zero Daze. I'm Chloe Kingman.
And I'm Owen Albright.
On November 13, 2024, in a hearing room on Capitol Hill, a journalist named Michael Schellenberger did something witnesses almost never do. He did not just describe a secret program. He handed the committee a document during the hearing while the cameras were running.
12 pages. No photographs attached. Written by someone whose name nobody in that room would say out loud and who would not confirm it publicly for another 5 months.
The chair, Nancy Mace, noted that it had been delivered to Congress that day. It went into the Congressional Record, which means that whatever else is true about it, the document is now a permanent part of the legislative history of this subject.
The program it describes is called Immaculate Constellation. The Department of Defense says it has no record of any program by that name. And we are going to take that denial seriously, because it deserves to be read closely rather than waved away.
We are also going to spend real time on what the document actually says, because most coverage of this story has never quoted it. It gets summarized as a secret UFO photo archive, and that summary loses the part that matters.
The part that matters is not a filing cabinet, it is an interception layer.
Start with the hearing itself, because the setting shapes what happened next. The title was Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, Exposing the Truth. It was a House Oversight hearing, and it was the first one in over a year.
Schellenberger is an investigative journalist and the founder of an outlet called Public. He is not a government official, he holds no clearance, and he was not there to testify about what he personally saw. He was there as the conduit for someone who was.
That distinction matters for how you weigh everything that follows. A journalist under oath can tell you truthfully that a source gave him a document. He cannot tell you the document is accurate.
He was also not alone at that table, and the rest of the panel is part of why the document landed the way it did. There were 4 witnesses.
Luis Elizondo, formerly of the Pentagon; Tim Gallaudet, a retired Navy Rear Admiral who went on to lead the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration; Michael Gold, a former senior official at NASA; and Schellenberger.
That is not a fringe panel. That is a retired flag officer, a former space agency executive, and 2 men who have worked inside or adjacent to the relevant programs.
Elizondo told the committee that advanced technologies, not made by the United States government or by any other government, are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. He said it flatly, under oath, as a statement of his own assessment.
And Gallaudet described something smaller, and for our purposes, more interesting. He said an email containing the GoFast video disappeared from his email server and from his colleagues' servers.
Sit with that next to the document, because the shapes match. The report describes a mechanism that catches this material and pulls it out of the ordinary chain. Gallaudet describes an instance of material leaving the ordinary chain.
One is an allegation about a system. The other is a retired admiral's account of one email. They are not the same claim, and one does not prove the other.
But they were said in the same room, on the same morning, by people who did not coordinate their testimony. That is the sort of convergence that is worth noting precisely, and worth not overselling.
And Schellenberger, to his credit, framed it that way in the room. He described the report as the work of a current, or former government official acting as a whistleblower.
Here is how he characterized the central allegation. The report describes, in his words, how the executive branch has been managing UAP and non-human intelligence issues without congressional knowledge, oversight, or authorization.
That is the sentence members reacted to, not the orbs, not the triangles. The claim that a branch of government has been running something the other branch was never told about.
So let us go to the document, not to what people say about it, to its own words.
It opens by describing itself. This document is the result of a multi-year, internal investigation into the subjects of unidentified anomalous phenomena, technologies of unknown origin, and non-human intelligence.
Internal. That word is doing real work. The author is not claiming to have gathered this from outside sources or from other people's testimony. He is claiming he assembled it from inside, from within the systems he had legitimate access to.
On what the program is, the document says this: Immaculate Constellation serves as a central, or parent, unacknowledged special access program that consolidates observations of UAP detected by tasked and untasked collection platforms.
2 pieces of jargon worth unpicking there, because the whole claim lives inside them.
An unacknowledged special access program is the most restricted category the American classification system has. A normal special access program is secret in its contents. An unacknowledged one is secret in its existence. The official position is not that you cannot know the details. The official position is that there is nothing to know.
And this is where we need to slow down and do something most coverage of this story never does, which is read the actual law. Because the claim that Congress was not told is treated as an accusation of wrongdoing, and it might not be one.
The governing statute is Title 10 of the United States Code, Section 119. It is the Congressional Oversight provision for special access programs, and it does exactly what you would hope. It requires the Department of Defense to report these programs to the Defense Committees annually, with justifications, funding, and the reason for the special access designation.
That is the rule. Now the exception, which is written into the same statute.
The Secretary of Defense can designate a program as waived if the Secretary determines that following the standard reporting procedure would adversely affect national security. The normal notification requirements can be set aside.
And when a program is waived, the briefing does not go to the committees. It goes to 8 people.
The chairs and ranking members of the defense committees, plus the majority and minority leaders of both chambers. The gang of 8. And the briefing is oral.
Oral. Not a document. Not a record that a staffer can pull 2 years later. A conversation in a room with no paper on the other side of it.
So consider what that means for a member of Congress who is not one of those 8. There is a lawful mechanism by which a program can exist, be funded, and be formally reported, and that member will never learn of it, and no rule has been broken.
Which reframes the whole allegation. When members say they were not told, they may be describing a system functioning exactly as designed rather than a system being defied.
And that is genuinely worse in one specific way. A violation can be prosecuted. A design cannot. You cannot subpoena your way out of a structure that was built, lawfully, to produce this exact result.
It also explains something that otherwise looks like theater. When members demand answers and receive a classified briefing and come out saying they learned nothing, that is not necessarily anyone stonewalling them in the moment.
It may be that the people briefing them are not read into the compartment either. In a properly built, unacknowledged program, the number of people who can confirm it to you is very small, and none of them are in that room.
So hold that as the legal backdrop for everything that follows. The document alleges a program that Congress was not told about. The law provides a route by which that could be true without a single person breaking a rule.
And that route also means a denial can be issued in good faith by someone who genuinely does not know. Which we will come back to when we get to the Pentagon's response.
And tasked versus untasked collection. Tasked means a satellite or a sensor or an aircraft was pointed at something on purpose by someone who wanted that image. Untasked means the sensor was doing something else entirely and caught it anyway.
Which is the more interesting category by far. Most of what an intelligence apparatus records, it records incidentally. A satellite photographing a port also photographs whatever is in the sky above the port.
The document's claim is that both streams feed one place. Deliberate collection and accidental collection, consolidated under a single parent program.
On how the material is sorted, the document lists 7 categories of evidence. An unacknowledged special access program, imagery intelligence, human intelligence, signals intelligence, government bureaucratic records, government historical records, and other sensitive sources.
That is not the taxonomy of a rumor. That is the taxonomy of somebody who has written intelligence products for a living.
It is also the kind of structure that is easy to imitate if you have written those products for a living and want a fabrication to look right. The form tells you the author knows the form. It does not tell you the contents are true.
Then there is the shape data. From 1991 to 2022, the document says, the most common shapes reported in this government dataset were spheres and orbs, disks and saucers, ovals and tic-tacs, triangles, boomerang and arrowhead forms, and irregular or organic shapes.
Spheres dominate. Triangles and boomerangs are described as the rarest by a wide margin, which is worth pausing on because it runs against the popular picture. Culturally, the triangle is the iconic modern craft. In this dataset, it is the exception.
And a 31-year window is a specific claim. Not decades of vague sightings. A dataset with a start date and an end date.
Now the passage that changes the story, and the one almost nobody quotes.
The document says that sophisticated internal information security controls are a major part of the program, which enforces compartmentalization by detecting, quarantining, and transferring imagery collection incidents before they are circulated within the military intelligence enterprise.
Read that again slowly, because if you only remember one thing from this episode, it should be that sentence.
The claim is not that somebody is hoarding photographs. The claim is that there is a mechanism which identifies this material at the moment of collection and removes it from the normal reporting chain before the analysts who would ordinarily see it ever do.
Detect, quarantine, transfer, before circulation.
And here is why that is the load-bearing claim. If it is true, then the absence of ordinary records is not evidence against the program. It is the product working exactly as designed.
Every oversight mechanism we have assumes that a record enters a system, and then somebody with authority can go look for it. This describes a layer that catches the record before it enters the system at all.
Which means the ordinary test, go and search for documents, would return nothing whether the program exists or not. That is an uncomfortable epistemic position, and we should sit in it rather than pretend it resolves.
It also cuts the other way, and we should say so in the same breath. A claim structured so that its own absence of evidence is explained by the claim is a claim that is very hard to falsify. That is a weakness, not a strength.
Both of those things are true at once. Hold them together.
Schellenberger described the collection side to the committee in some detail. High-quality imagery intelligence and measurement and signature intelligence.
Measurement and signature intelligence is the technical discipline that deals with what a thing radiates rather than what it looks like. Heat, radar return, acoustics, emissions. It is the part of the intelligence world that would tell you what an object is made of and how it is moving, not merely that it was there.
The sources he listed were low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, military and civilian aviation altitudes, and maritime environments. That is a full spectrum picture, spaced down to sea level.
On volume, he told the committee the military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information. Still photos, video, other sensor information, and of the high-resolution material, in his words, hundreds, maybe thousands.
Which is a number worth being careful with, because it is a journalist relaying a source's characterization, not a count anyone has verified.
Let us talk about the imagery the document describes, and let us be precise about the status of it, once, at the top, and then leave that standing.
None of it is attached. All of it is described in prose. There is not a single photograph in the 12 pages that went to Congress.
The first is an orb, a white sphere emerging from the ocean, roughly 20 miles off the coast of Kuwait, filmed from a helicopter, later joined by a second orb.
The second is a triangle. A large black equilateral triangle, hovering roughly 200 meters above Russian naval intelligence vessels off the coast of Kamchatka, in the Pacific.
And there is a third, a second black triangle, smaller and more angular, over a Russian intelligence vessel in the Atlantic, at night.
Now here is the detail in that material that almost every account skips, and it is the one I cannot stop thinking about.
The Russian vessels do not react.
The document's own analysis notes it. The ships show no visible response, and the assessment raises the possibility that the crews had foreknowledge of the craft's appearance.
Think about what that implies if the imagery exists and the analysis is sound. The interesting claim is no longer about the object at all. It is that a foreign navy was expecting it.
Which would mean the phenomenon, whatever it is not exclusively an American secret. It would mean there is at least one other state actor with enough familiarity to be unimpressed.
That is an enormous claim resting on a description of a photograph that nobody outside the compartment has seen. Which is exactly the shape of this entire story.
Let us turn to where the program allegedly came from, because the origin claim is the piece that connects this episode to the last one.
The report alleges the Department of Defense created Immaculate Constellation around 2017. Specifically, after the New York Times published its story describing ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
That is a claim about institutional reflex, and it is worth stating plainly. The allegation is that the response to a disclosure was not investigation, and was not transparency, it was consolidation.
A story appears in the press. The response is to build the thing that makes sure the next story cannot appear.
If you listen to our last episode, this should sound structurally familiar, because we have documented this exact shape before, in the released record.
AAWSAP ran from 2008 to 2012. It was cancelled, in the words of Aero's own historical record report, due to lack of merit and the utility of the deliverables. That is the government's own language about its own program.
And when it was cancelled, its supporters did not accept the verdict and go home. They went to the Department of Homeland Security and got a prospective special access program stood up in 2011, under the name Kona Blue, to protect material that the government's released records say was only assumed to exist.
That is documented. It is in the released files. The architecture was built before the thing it was meant to protect had been established to exist.
So the pattern is not hypothetical. People in this space demonstrably do build protective structures ahead of the evidence. The Immaculate Constellation report claims another instance of that pattern. It does not prove it.
What it does is make the claim less exotic than it sounds. You are not being asked to believe something unprecedented. You are being asked to believe something that has a documented precedent under a different name.
One program is dismissed in public, in the same period another is alleged to be consolidating in private. Name the pattern. Do not assert the second half.
Which brings us to the man who wrote it.
Matthew Brown. And the first thing to understand about him is the sequence, because the sequence is unusual and it matters.
He did not put his name to the document when it went to Congress. It sat in the Congressional Record, anonymous, for months.
He confirmed authorship publicly in April 2025 in a 3-part interview series on the Weaponized podcast with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp.
So the claim was tested in public, attacked, denied by the Pentagon, and picked over by journalists for months before the author was willing to attach his name and his history to it.
That is the opposite of the pattern you would expect from someone seeking attention. Attention-seeking behavior front-loads the name.
It is not proof of anything. People come forward late for many reasons, including that they were building a case, and including that they were waiting to see what it would cost.
He is described in the reporting as a former Department of Defense and State Department analyst, a Pentagon intelligence contractor with access to classified systems.
And he says the report is the product of a 4-year internal investigation conducted during his time inside the national security enterprise. Not a leak of one document, an accumulation.
Corbell is the one who physically provided the report to Congress ahead of the November hearing. So the chain runs source, to journalist, to committee, in that order.
Then there is the account of what happened when he raised it internally. By his own telling, when he identified this material and took it to his superiors, the instruction that came back was to delete the files.
Not investigate, not escalate, not refer it to a general counsel or an inspector general. Delete.
If that account is accurate, it is arguably a more serious allegation than the program itself. A program can be lawful and secret. An instruction to destroy federal records is neither.
And it is the point where this stops being a story about the phenomenon and starts being a story about process.
Because the entire post-church committee architecture, the inspectors general, the whistleblower statutes, the classified disclosure channels, all of it exists precisely so that a person in exactly this position has somewhere to go. That is not a podcast.
He says he went to those channels. He says the answer was deletion. Then he went to Congress. And the members who received a classified briefing afterward said publicly they had learned nothing substantive.
Then he went public, not first, last.
Brown has made a broader set of claims in public since, and they need handling carefully. Because they are the least supported thing, he says, and they are the part that travels furthest.
He has said that multiple independent sources told him of classified executive orders and agreements, sometimes described as treaties, signed by previous presidents without congressional knowledge or approval, and that these arrangements were built to keep elected officials, including the sitting president, from exercising authority over this material.
Notice the change in evidentiary footing there. The report itself is first person. He says he saw the material. This claim is not. This is what other people told him.
Which puts it in exactly the category he is otherwise distinguished from. On the archive, he is a direct witness. On the agreements, he is relaying, the same way Grush was relaying.
He is not necessarily wrong. The point is that the two claims do not carry the same weight and should not be repeated as though they do. And the difference is one he draws himself in how he describes them.
It is also the claim with the largest constitutional implication, which is exactly why the standard for it should be highest rather than lowest.
If an executive agreement genuinely removes a category of activity from presidential authority, that is not a secrecy story. That is a sovereignty story. And it would be the most consequential thing anyone in this field has alleged.
And there is nothing in public supporting it. No document, not a redacted one, no citation, no title. So we flag it, we attribute it, and we leave it there.
It is worth putting his account next to David Grush's, because the two are structurally different in a way that gets flattened constantly.
Grush's testimony was largely secondhand. Information conveyed to him by others with direct knowledge, in his role reviewing programs, which is why the standard objection to Grush is that he is relaying rather than reporting.
Brown's claim is first person. He says he saw the material himself, in a role that gave him legitimate access to see it.
That makes his account harder to dismiss on the relaying objection. It does not make it easier to verify. Both men's claims rest, in the end, on their own word, plus whatever the institutional reaction reveals.
So let us look at the institutional reaction. It came fast, and it was flat.
The Pentagon spokesperson Sue Goff said this: the Department of Defense has no record, present or historical, of any type of special access program called Immaculate Constellation.
Take that seriously. It is unhedged. There is no wiggle language in it, no we are looking into it, no we cannot confirm or deny. It is a plain assertion of a negative.
And now read exactly what it covers, because the boundaries of a denial are as informative as the denial.
It is a denial of a name in a record system.
Program nicknames in this space are routinely changed. That is not a conspiracy claim, it is basic security practice. A nickname that has appeared in public reporting is a compromised nickname, and compromised nicknames get replaced.
So a denial phrased at the level of the name does not address the function the document describes. Those are different assertions.
We should be careful here, because this is where analysis can slide into having it both ways. If every denial can be dissolved by saying they must have changed the name, then no denial can ever count, and we have built a machine that cannot be contradicted.
Right. So state the limitation precisely and then stop. The denial establishes that no program under that specific nickname appears in the records the department searched. It does not establish that the described function does not exist. And it is also not evidence that the function does exist.
The honest position is that the denial narrows the question, rather than closing it.
There is one more structural point here that we have made on this show before, in the context of the office that investigates this subject for the Pentagon.
AARO was created to resolve this question, and its access depends on being read into the programs it is meant to examine. An office cannot investigate a compartment it has not been admitted to.
So when AARO reports that it found no evidence of a secret program, the finding carries exactly as much weight as its access allows, and its access is granted by the same department that would house the program.
That is not an accusation against anyone at AARO. It is a description of where the office sits in the org chart, and it is the reason a clean bill of health from inside the building settles less than it appears to.
AARO's broader institutional position is worth adding, because it is the intellectual frame the department has settled on. In its own reporting, AARO has characterized long-standing claims that the Pentagon is secretly studying this subject as the product of circular reporting.
Circular reporting is a real and serious analytic failure mode. It means a small group of people hear a rumor, repeat it to one another, and each repetition is then counted as independent confirmation. The rumor acquires the appearance of corroboration purely through circulation.
It is a genuine phenomenon, and it does happen in this field. It is also, conveniently, an argument that can be applied to any set of witnesses who know each other.
Which is the recurring difficulty with this entire subject. Almost every explanatory frame available, on both sides, is unfalsifiable if you push it hard enough.
Which is why the next part of the story is the most valuable thing in this episode, because it is not testimony. It is documented behavior.
The Freedom of Information Act sequence, and this one is still running in 2026.
An archive called the Black Vault filed a request, not a broad phishing request, a precisely targeted one.
It asked for a search of emails to or from Major General Derek O'Malley, the Director of Special Programs and Director of the Department of Defense Special Access Program Central Office, for communications containing the phrase Immaculate Constellation.
That custodian is not a random choice. If a special access program by that name existed, that office is where the paperwork would live. That is the office whose entire function is administering these programs.
So the request was well aimed. It asked the one office that would know to search its own email for one phrase.
The final response came on January 26, 2026, and the answer was that no search would be conducted at all.
Not that the search found nothing. that no search was performed.
The stated reasoning, per the response letter, was that a search was not conducted because the subject matter itself does not exist, and an extensive email search on the custodian would not yield responsive records.
Sit with the structure of that sentence, because it is doing something remarkable.
The requester asked the government to look. The government declined to look, on the grounds that it already knows what looking would find.
The conclusion is doing the work that the search was supposed to do. The answer is being used as the reason not to ask the question.
That is not a claim about aliens. That is a claim about how a records request was handled, and it is on paper.
And this is the part to actually watch. The Black Vault appealed that refusal. The appeal was granted. A search is to take place.
Which means there is now a concrete, scheduled, institutional action with two possible outcomes, and both of them are informative.
If the search returns records containing that phrase, the department's flat denial becomes very difficult to sustain in its current form.
And if the search returns nothing, that is a real data point against the document, and we should say so in advance rather than after, so that nobody accuses us of moving the goalposts later.
We are saying it now. A clean, genuine search of that custodian returning nothing would count against the claim.
Meanwhile, the legislative thread kept moving, and where it moved is itself informative.
The next major hearing came on September 9, 2025. The title was Restoring Public Trust Through UAP Transparency and Whistleblower Protection, held under the Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets.
The witness list included George Knapp and Dylan Borland, whose case we covered in full in an earlier episode. Immaculate Constellation itself was not the subject of that hearing.
What the hearing established was the direction of travel. The legislative energy had moved from tell us what the program is to protect the people who try to tell us.
That shift is a tacit admission. You do not build shelter for witnesses if the first question has been answered.
That hearing also produced the footage Representative Eric Burleson showed of an American drone firing a Hellfire missile at a fast-moving orb off the coast of Yemen in October 2024. The object appeared to be struck and not destroyed.
Which is a separate story with its own evidentiary problems, but it tells you the temperature in the room. Members are no longer asking whether there is something to look at.
Let us bring this into land, and let us be honest about what we have and what we do not.
What we do not have is decisive. No photograph from the alleged archive has surfaced publicly, not one frame. No second named insider has corroborated the program by name, on the record, with dates and an office.
The document is a 12-page summary, written by one person, describing imagery that has not been released, about a program the Department of Defense says has no record under that name.
And it is worth being specific about what is missing from it, because vague skepticism is as lazy as vague belief.
The document contains no program element number, no contract number, no unit designation, no named office of primary responsibility, no collection dates tied to specific platforms.
Compare that to what we walked through in the last episode. On the Bigelow program, we could give you a solicitation number, a contract number, a start date, the name of the contracting officer's representative, and the appropriation it rode in on.
That is the difference between a program you can pull a paper trail on and a program you cannot. And the honest thing to say is that this document sits entirely on the second side of that line.
Now, the counter to that is built into the claim, and it is not unreasonable. Those identifiers are precisely the details that would identify the compartment, and publishing them would be the disclosure that gets someone prosecuted rather than heard.
So the absence of identifiers is either the tell that there is nothing underneath, or the single most predictable feature of a document written by someone trying to stay out of prison. Both readings are available, and neither can be resolved from the text.
The other missing piece is corroboration in the ordinary sense. There is one author, one name on it.
And that matters institutionally, because a program of the size described would not have one witness. An archive consolidating collection across orbit, atmosphere, aviation and maritime would touch analysts, custodians, security officers, contracting staff.
The document describes a system with a large surface area, and so far exactly one person has stepped forward from it. A document is not evidence of what it describes. It is evidence that someone wrote it. Those are different things, and the distance between them is exactly where this story lives.
What we do have is a specific and unusual set of documented facts.
The document exists and is in the Congressional Record. It was delivered during a sworn hearing by a working journalist. Its author eventually attached his name to it and surrendered his standing to do so.
The Department of Defense denied the name, flatly. Then the department refused to search for records of the name, using the denial itself as the reason not to search. Then it lost the appeal on that refusal.
That last sequence is the part that does not require anyone to trust anyone. It is process, on paper, with dates.
So here is where it stands. 2 readings survive everything on the table, and neither one is comfortable.
The first is that the document describes a real interception layer, in which case the absence of ordinary records is precisely what such a layer would produce. The denial of the name is technically accurate and substantively empty, and the refusal to search is what an institution does when it does not want to generate a paper trail it would then have to explain.
The second is that one analyst with genuine access and real expertise assembled an internally coherent picture out of fragments, anomalies, and inference, and a congressional hearing handed it a platform it had not yet earned. In which case the denial is simply true, and the refusal to search is ordinary bureaucratic impatience with a request the office considered frivolous.
Both of those are consistent with everything currently public. That is not fence-sitting. That is the actual state of the evidence.
What separates them is not another interview or another podcast appearance. It is the search that has now been ordered.
Which is a rare thing in this subject. Usually we end an episode by saying the work that would settle it has not been done and nobody intends to do it.
This time the work has been formally requested, formally refused, and then formally ordered anyway. The next move is genuinely on the record and pending.
So the question worth carrying out of this is not whether you believe Matthew Brown.
It is what you will make of the result when that search comes back. Decide now, while it is still unknown, what each outcome would mean to you. That is the only way to know afterward whether you followed the evidence or simply kept the position you started with.
And if the search quietly never happens, or comes back with a scope so narrow it could not have found anything, that is a result too.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode. At Zero Daze, we know you have many choices in where to get your information from. Our continued efforts rely on the actions of our subscribers, so please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be informed the moment a new episode is live. The full sourcing is in the article at strangerthanfiction.org. The link is in the description.